started here. Want to start off with just a couple of reminders. If you're not speaking, please make sure that you and also a reminder that this meeting will be recorded. So if you're not speaking, please also keep your camera off to help save bandwidth and to make everything smoother. So once again, this is Dan Schultz with Division of Water Rights in the State Water Board, and welcome to the California Environmental Flows Workgroup meeting on November 9th. So typically we start off with a little bit of roll call, but we found in the past that the roll call is kind of a little challenging with everybody remote. And so we've been skipping that the last few meetings. If folks really want to do roll call, we always can, just let me know. So our agenda items today are we have our first item is a voluntary drought initiative presented by National Marine Fisheries Service and Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we'll go ahead and do some drought updates from round robins with a round robin plan. And then we'll get some updates on the California Environmental Flows Framework Implementation Work Plan, and then any other updates in the non-drought related through the round robin. And then we'll wrap it up with some potential topics and for the next meeting and action items. So one thing I want to mention today that we're going to try something a little bit new with this remote stuff. So what we'd like to try to experiment with today are some polls. So we're going to the first polls are just going to kind of make sure everybody can respond to the poll. And then we're going to go from there. But what I want everybody to take a look at, unfortunately, you will have to be in the Teams app or have Teams up to do the poll. So if you're just on the phone, you won't be able to participate. But across the top, your top bar, you have the little people icon to see who, at least on my screen, it's across the top bar, but you should see a little people icon to see who's in the meeting, a little cartoon comment bubble for comments in the chat, and then there's a little happy face waving for emojis, and then there's a little F with a little rectangular square with a couple circles on it. That's the poll forms. So the way this will work is it's going to do two things can happen. When we send out the poll, it should just pop up in front of your screen and you can go ahead and respond on it. You can also open up the form, the F form, and you can respond to the poll there. You can also respond to the poll in chat. However, if you respond, you only get one response. So even if you respond all three ways, you'll only be counted once. So that's what we experimented with yesterday. So if everybody can see the poll, if you don't see a poll, go ahead and raise your hand and we can help walk you through. Please make sure everybody's muted. If you don't see the poll, just raise your hand and we can help you find it. If you can see the poll, go ahead and respond to it.
Dan, I could see the poll, but when I went to submit my response, it says submission failed. Please try again later.
Yeah, I got the same response, Dan.
Same here.
Well, maybe it's not going to work. Maybe it only works internal State Water Board. Huh. Anybody not in the State Water Board that can respond?
Yes, I was able to. This is Jesse.
Yeah, I'm with Reclamation and I could respond.
Okay, maybe try responding in either the chat or the forms through the chat option or the forms database, those of you that are having issues.
In the chat, it said something went wrong. Please try again.
The poll should, for those of you that are looking to still try to figure out how to respond, if we send the poll out again, it will be a new poll. So you try the forms or the chat to find the poll response. If none of those will work, we might just have to roll with only some people being able to respond. Let's see, how many people do we have that could respond?
Dan, I don't know if you can
Looks like-
see everything. It looks like about half, a little over half were able to respond.
Yeah. So I think I'm not sure what the fix is since we played with it, but we didn't do it from different ways. It might be how people are joining teams. I'm not sure, but I would propose at this point that we'll try to circle back and figure out how to get this to work better in the future. But let's just, for the purposes of the poll, at least move forward and have the people that can respond when we get to the questions go ahead and respond. And then as we go through the meeting, I'll try to think if there's a way that we can get other people's response outside of the poll to kind of do a summary at the end of the meeting. So we'll go ahead and roll out with our first formal question here, and people can go ahead and jot, if you weren't able to respond or can't respond, you can always just jot down your answer to the poll, and then we'll have a little discussion at the end. So here's the first question. I'll give everybody a moment to read it over and respond.
Dan,
Yes.
could I ask a clarifying question? This is Norman over at the Department of Water Resources. I mean, in my current capacity, it would be unlikely that I would be applying the CEF. So, I therefore could potentially check box number 1, but I guess the point is this question to try to understand the level of communication and the clarity of the materials, or something else? Because if it's the level of clarity of the materials and so on, I would check a different box here.
Yeah, I think that's correct. It's really about the clarity of this question. I think is more about the clarity of the materials and your sort of comfort in kind of using or trying to use the materials.
Okay.
Fiona?
Okay.
We want the plates with the gold band, right?
We can hear you, Jeanette.
Jeanette, could you repeat that?
She was talking about plates.
Okay, so it looks like we're at about 26 responses, and last time we were able to do 30. So I think we can go ahead and move on. This poll will stay open for those of you that haven't responded yet. You can go ahead. We're gonna close this poll before the CEF implementation work plan items, so that we can put together a summary at the end of that presentation. So I think at this point we can go ahead and turn it over to National Marine Fisheries Service and CDFW to present on the Voluntary Drought Initiative. Rick, I assume you have a presentation and are going to share your screen. Is that correct?
Yes, correct, Dan. Let me see if I can do that. Great. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So let me get this going here. So good morning, everyone. As Dan mentioned, my name is Rick Rogers. I work with the National Marine Fisheries Service in Santa Rosa, California, and I am the California Coastal Office In-Stream Flow Coordinator. So today I'm going to be giving you a very short kind of introduction to the recent voluntary drought initiative that CDFW and National Marine Fisheries Service crafted this summer. So let's just start with the very basics. So really what this VDI is, it's the agency's intent. It represents the agency's intent to work with landowners throughout the state to reduce the negative impacts of drought on ESA and the California ESA listed salmonids and sturgeon, so salmon, steelhead, and sturgeon. And this is a repeat of a 2014 effort, which was the very initial VDI VDI effort that expired sometime in, I believe, 2017 after the drought was declared to be over. So although this is a joint initiative, we kept it as a kind of a separate process for applying, and there's a separate template for each of the agencies. And really what the VDI focuses down to is 5 distinct actions for minimizing drought impacts. And these are projects that target flow augmentation, securing in-stream flows, monitoring of drought impacts on salmon, steelhead, and sturgeon, fish rescue, and winter floodplain inundation and recharge. And basically, the fish rescue, it's important to note that the fish rescue does not cover the capture and relocation. It only applies to really granting and acquiring property access to do that that fish rescue. And then it's important to note that the first 4 activities are similar to the 2014 effort, but the winter floodplain inundation and recharge is a new action that we added for the 2021 effort. So there's some real key changes that we incorporated into this 2021 effort, and one has to do with the VDI expiration date. In 2014, the whole VDI basically came about from the governor's drought declaration, and it was crafted so that it expired when that drought declaration expired. What we did in 2021 was we wanted this to be a living document, and we didn't want to have to recreate the wheel each time we entered into a new drought. So we made this a living document, and it's really up to CDF&W and NMFS to determine when it's appropriate to use the VDI. So that can be at times when perhaps there is not an official drought designation from the governor, but when the 2 agencies still feel that within a certain watershed, drought conditions or dry conditions warrant using the tool. Another key change that we made for 2021 was the area covered by the VDI. Back in 2014, there were certain watersheds, a handful of watersheds that I believe were identified within the drought declaration to which the VDI was focused on. And those included the Shasta and the Scott, some of the lower Russian River tribs. What we did in 2021 was we didn't want to box ourselves into just identifying specific watersheds ahead of time. So the 2021 version applies statewide, wherever ESA or CESA listed salmon, steelhead, and sturgeon reside. Now, it's important to note that the VDI does not carry any regulatory weight to it. It does not give any incidental take under CESA or the ESA. But what it does is within that VDI, there is language that when it comes to potential take that may occur due to implementation of the VDI, that when there is deliberations of whether to prosecute that take or to bring an enforcement action, that the two agencies will basically consider the good deeds that the landowner is doing to help the stream and help the listed species during those deliberations. So it's really not any guarantee, but it's probably very unlikely that if someone was to inadvertently take some listed fish while implementing the implementing the VDI, that either of the agencies would go forth with enforcement actions. And the last point on this slide is just really to bring up kind of a heads up to everybody that we do actually have a separate vehicle that can give that take authorization for stream flow augmentation projects. And those are projects that are using an off-channel water source, such as a pond, to pipe water and release it into a creek. We do have a stream flow augmentation safe harbor agreement under Section 10 of the ESA that is right now being finalized and should be in place and ready to be used during next summer if we have a dry summer. So the question may come about, hey, do these projects actually have any type of meaningful benefit during droughts? And back in 2014, there were a couple of projects in Sonoma County that did some analysis and some monitoring of potential benefits resulting from stream flow releases from off-channel ponds. And one was within Porter Creek, a direct tributary to the Russian River, right below Dry Creek. And we were actually fortunate in that Gabe Rossi did part of his dissertation on the project up there and the research that he conducted. And what Gabe found was that the flow releases that were conducted on Porter Creek actually had a pretty significant benefit to dissolved oxygen levels, which from some of the other research done by Sea Grant in Sonoma County, we're kind of finding out that when you get disconnection of riffles from pools due to low summer flows, the real critical aspect that actually leads to fish perishing is really low DO levels that basically crash. So it was very good to see that DO levels were maintaining and improving. under these flow releases. They did not see significant improvements to water temperature, though. Let's see, also in Butte Creek in the Sacramento River, there was a different type of VDI project. It was where a bunch of landowners got together and agreed to do basically flow conservation efforts to allow more water to stay within the channel. And that was shown to be very effective at helping summer spring run Chinook within that system. So what's in it for each of the parties involved? So for the fish, as I just presented, there are real tangible benefits to in-stream habitat and fish survival that can result from these types of actions. And another important point is that by entering into a VDI with these landowners, it does not preclude us from trying to achieve better flows in the future. I want to stress that the flows that we're talking about and the let's say, for instance, the flow augmentation projects that are releasing water from an off-channel, pond into a creek, the amount of flows are really minimal. I mean, I look at them as basically survival flows, and there's nothing that we would never want to look at those flows as something that is a long-term solution to meeting the needs of the species. And this VDI doesn't corner us into that type of realm there. We can always work through emergency drought regulations, water right protests. We can work through the CEFF dynamic to basically try to get those flows that are not only going to just keep fish alive during a extremely dry summer, but are going to allow them to hopefully recover as populations. So for the landowner, really what they're getting, as I mentioned earlier, there's really no regulatory authority behind the VDI. So what they're getting is really kind of a good feeling of doing something good for the resource. Some of the bigger applicants that we've had in the past have been, wine companies. And they, advertise their work within the VDI and kind of work it into their business model, so to speak. But other than that, there is no guaranteed, curtailment avoidance, unlike in the 2014 and 15 effort. There was more of a stated curtailment avoidance kind of mechanism that was included within the VDI language, that if someone, a landowner, took part in the VDI, that they could avoid a curtailment notice. That was not included within this 2021 effort. But basically, if landowners do come together and come up with a local solution to work cooperatively to meet the needs of the species through the VDI effort, the State Water Board will consider that when moving forward with any type of curtailment or other actions on their part. So specifically for the 2021 effort, our next steps right now is we are working with local partners to try to get the word out on this VDI effort. And those partners are NGOs, local RCDs, local governments, etc. Unfortunately, the VDI effort this past summer took some time to work through, and we didn't really get it on the street until, I believe, probably August or September. So it was rather late in the drought game. And we weren't really able to broadcast and get the word out as well as we would have hoped. We did not actually get any applications this past summer for the VDI, and I think it was partly the result of that limited outreach. So this winter, we are really trying to do a full court press, get that word out. Part of that effort is getting the word out just broadly to the entire state, but also we are trying to really prioritize some watersheds where drought impacts are especially acute, and really kind of put a more focused effort in those watersheds. The outreach message, as far as a letter to landowners, is currently being crafted with CDF&W and NIMS. And I was actually remiss earlier. I wanted to mention who the main players were on this VDI. And that would basically be me, and then Jesse Maxfield from CDF&W, and Daniel Kratville from CDF&W. So we will be working on this outreach letter that's going to be mailed out in the next couple of months. And we are also working with the State Water Board mapping tool that Dan has set us up with, Dan Schultz, and trying to use that tool to get APN numbers within these watersheds where we're doing outreach, and translate those APN numbers into addresses and property owners. So that's going to take a little bit of time, but I think we can work that all out and get those letters out definitely well in advance of next summer. And that's the end. Any questions? I'm definitely looking forward to answering. Thank you.
So let's start with, if you have questions, let's do a hand raise, and we'll go through and answer all the people with their hand raised, and then we'll turn over to the phone if people have additional questions. Yes, Kimberly Burr.
Well, I thought nobody else was going to speak, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Hey, thank you, Rick and Jessica and Daniel for all your hard work on this this voluntary stuff. This is so important. I mean, it seems like a last-ditch effort to get water back in our streams, and we really do appreciate all the participants who have kind of stepped forward to help. So I think that's all fantastic. I guess my question for you, Rick, was just if the water's being taken out in excess, it seems like the state of the feds might have more say in how the water taking is occurring, and instead of relying on voluntary or ponds that are full, or is there some other mechanism to keep water in the streams in the first place? Because I'm assuming, and maybe this is completely off base, but I'm assuming that a lot of the streams are dry partly because of diversions, not just the drought, but maybe you can set me straight on that. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. That's a good question. really what the landowners that we're reaching out to and trying to work with are landowners that have an off-stream store. Well, I'm talking specifically about the flow augmentation aspect, but really we're trying to work with landowners that have off-stream storage that they've actually diverted to during winter months. So, we definitely would not want to get into an agreement with someone that was diverting during the summer, but was then putting water back into the system. That wouldn't make much sense. So that's one of the ways that, we're trying to, avoid that type of situation and maximize the benefit. As far as correcting the issue, I mean, you make a real good point there. The main issue during the summer is that, obviously, extraction outweighs really what's available in the stream, and that's why we're getting these really low stream flows. As I mentioned in the presentation, there's other measures and kind of pathways that we can utilize to try to address that, but they are all they're all pathways that are going to take time, whether that be a couple of years or several years or maybe even longer. They might entail water right issues and things like that, contentious issues that take a long time to solve. So this is really meant, again, to just try to ensure that we're meeting survival flows and not losing fish during these critically dry summers, while at the same time we can be working on those other paths to try to achieve better flows.
Yeah, Rick, this is Jesse, and Kimberly, I'll just chime in. We have some projects in our region where we're trying to sort of offset riparian rights diversions during the summer months by setting up, storage projects on different farms and things in critical watersheds. And so those projects are not, kind of specific to this VDI, but those are some of the drought resiliency projects that we're supporting in the region, and groups like Trout Unlimited and the San Mateo County Resource Conservation District are working on projects where they're putting in tanks or putting in ponds and developing these forbearance agreements with landowners so that they're not doing direct diversion during the late summer and fall months. So those are some other projects that are happening that are kind of getting at the issue that you brought up in our region.
Yep, great point, Jesse.
All right, any other questions? Like Chris Milan has her hand up or just went back down?
Yeah, I have a question from the phone.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
go ahead.
am I unmuted?
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Let's go Chris first. Let's go with Chris first, and then we'll go to the individual on the phone.
Okay, so thank you for holding this meeting and keeping us informed of the SEF. For the last 2 years, NGOs have been discussing the benefit of flood inundation to help recharge groundwater. And one of the things that has come up in the discussions, and I'm sure you've all heard of it, is that if you flood ag lands, you have a high probability of contaminating the groundwater within 10 years with higher concentration of nitrates. So when you talk to the landowners who might want to do the VDI, are you specific about where the beneficial project could occur, that it shouldn't occur on ag lands, that it needs to occur in areas where the soils have not been contaminated, is the question.
Yeah, good question, Chris. So, just to clarify, the flood, the recharge aspect of the VDI is specific to floodplain recharge. And the whole idea there was, there was a realization with Sigma coming along and a lot of the GSAs and Sigma planning, groundwater recharge type projects. But there was the understanding that most of them would probably pick, off-channel recharge, either putting water up onto ag fields or even diverting water out of channel into like infiltration basins. Projects like that do not really have much of a benefit other than increasing the elevation of the water table, which could lead to higher summer base flows. But one of the real limiting factors that we've noted in all of our recovery plans is the availability of winter rearing habitat for juvenile fish. And that really comes into floodplains being inundated and creating that, shallow, heavily vegetated, very complex and productive habitat with slow velocities that those juvenile fish need. So the VDI is really only covering those types of actions that kind of reconnect floodwater with the adjacent floodplain, and doesn't really cover those types of projects that you're mentioning. But for those types of projects, and we actually have some landowners that are discussing those, that on-farm recharge projects right now with us. That's definitely a impact, the nitrate leaching, pesticide leaching, things like that. Those are things that I'm sure we'll be discussing and be aware of.
All right, next question was the gentleman on the phone.
Yeah, thanks. This is Greg Reese with the Bay Institute. I was just wondering, this is characterized as kind of a small pond situation. Is there any limit on the size of storage used, and on the landowner size, or could an irrigation district do that, or is it with the individual landowner? Just curious about the limits on size.
Yeah, we did not within the VDI actually put any limits, and we did just generally extend it to private landowners. So I guess it would be on a project by project basis that the two agencies would need to think about a project and see if it really fits the intent of the VDI. But we didn't put any type of limitation as far as what type of private landowner it is or the size of the off-channel pond or the off-channel water source.
Okay, thanks.
And next up looks like Norman Johns, and then Kimberly and Chris, your hands are still up. So I don't know if you have another question or if it's just left over.
Thank you, Dan. I guess this question is for Rick or Jesse, either one. On the fifth of the many actions you described, the floodplain inundation, similar to the last questioner. The other The other mechanisms are clearly things where it takes boots on the ground and proactive action, ahead of time to either create storage or augment storage or something like that for flow augmentation. Whereas the last one on the floodplain inundation seems to be purely, weather based. And I'm wondering, why is it in the same toolbox? Because it doesn't really seem to be the same kind of proactive action, unless there's something I'm missing about it.
Yeah, well, the floodplain augmentation, what was really meant for, the landowner would have to probably do some planning. The real, I guess, audience for that type of action, we were thinking were, ag lands or, grazing lands, those types of actions that kind of still have a functional stream, running through their land, but yet over time, they've probably implemented certain things that have confined the channel, and, whether that be a levee that's been put in place, that the historic floodplain is behind the levee, or maybe they have put in, their vineyard rows or their crop rows so close to the channel that they've used, bank stabilization to protect that. So the whole idea was hopefully to incentivize, those types of landowners to, pull back a levee, where it makes sense, to maybe re-engage a historic floodplain.
Okay.
Those are the types of projects that we kind of had in mind when we came up with that.
I see.
But,
that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, but just on your first point, with the flow augmentation projects, a lot of those don't really take much construction or infrastructure type work, because a lot of these lands, especially, I'm kind of speaking of my direct area up here in Sonoma and Napa wine country and so forth, but a lot of these landowners have irrigation ponds, whether they be for summer irrigation or maybe for winter frost control. But they already have these existing ponds on their property that you would still have to buy the piping and kind of somehow organize that and implement that aspect. But the ponds are there's a lot of ponds there that could probably be used under this program.
Thanks. That helps.
Sure thing.
All right. Chris, did you have another question? Your hand's still up.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay. So in regards to the targeted flow augmentation and working with a property owner who has off-stream storage in a retention or a detention pond of some kind, is there a metric built into this possible VDI that ensures that there's a duration and a flow CFS that over time, or is it just 2 weeks, a month? I mean, is there a metric that you would want this to measure up to so that the fish can rely on the flows during the dry period, if that makes any sense?
No, that's a good question. And the way that we crafted this was that these would be basically 1-year agreements. So they would basically just be for, one summer, one dry period. And then they can be renewed, the next year if conditions warrant, and keep doing that on an annual basis. And during that time, what that allows us to do is to, do some monitoring, do some evaluation of whether actions during 1 year did provide a benefit, whether they didn't, whether there were changes that could be made to the project dynamic so that it does provide a benefit. So, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but they're not like set in stone in perpetuity or for a certain period. They're really only a summer by summer type commitment.
So that's
Yeah.
that's important information too, but I'm going more to the size of the off-stream storage and what kind of flows it will provide over that dry period. I mean, do you look at that to see if you're going to get a benefit for 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, I
Go
can
ahead,
I
Jess.
can weigh in on that.
Yep.
So these would be things that would be discussed at the individual project level. And so if we have somebody who's interested, that's kind of the first thing to figure out. Where's the project located? Is there a benefit? Is there habitat there? There's a lot of different things that we have to look into. But of course, the amount of water and what kinds of flows, would make sense there. So I could just say from one project that we looked at, there's a lot of discussions about kind of experimenting with the flow releases and just seeing, what certain amounts of flow release will do. So it's some experimentation, but yeah, it's really based on, what's available there and whether or not it makes sense in that particular location. And then you kind of can work backwards from there on the amount of flow release and try to get an idea of what the duration is. But yeah, it is, fairly complicated stuff to get that all worked out for an individual project, but that's where those individual landowner agreements would be worked out. And there would be, discussion with folks who understand how all that works and are familiar with that particular location and the geology and whatnot, that would weigh in on all that. So.
Yeah, and I can give just a real quick example. Back, I believe in 2016 on Green Valley Creek, we were working with a landowner that really only had a pond that could provide 7 acre-feet of water. And so, we came up with a flow release schedule that maximized that volume of water. But, really what we did was we found that by just releasing during the 12 hours of nighttime and not releasing during the day, that was enough to extend that 7 acre-feet of water. And we're talking about a very little bit of water that needed to be released, like less than 1/10 of a CFS. Really just aimed at keeping the riffles wet, basically. But by doing that phased release, we were able to provide a benefit and keep the fish alive, and at the same time, kind of extend the time that we had for water releases, and it extended all the way through the summer. So I guess, the moral of the story is it doesn't really take that. It takes probably a lot less water than most people would think to really make a difference or have a benefit.
Yeah, and the more of these projects that get put in place, the more information we have and better understanding we have of what types of flow releases work and where and for how long. And so. But there is actually quite a bit of information out there based on the projects that have been put in place previously.
Yeah, and I would just add and vouch for these programs during the last drought. You know, there was a lot of benefit to these programs that couldn't really be accomplished by something like a regulation alone or anything else like that. And some of these projects have turned into very successful long-term projects from the last effort as well. We talked a little about Green Valley with Jackson Family Wines. That's an ongoing project that has been in place since the drought. Porter Creek, I don't remember who the landowner is that does that one. But that one's also been successful and was actually in place prior to 2015. They were working that one out. And they're all different. For Green Valley, there's a limited amount of water, and it's leveraging that water to the fullest extent possible. Porter Creek has a little bit more water that they can put in so they can extend that project more. And then there's also on Dutchville Creek, there's Camp Meeker that had a diversion from the Russian River main stem that had capacity to divert more. And so they diverted more with a 1707 that then puts that water back down Dutchville Creek and goes back into the channel. And that's probably the most secure project from a water standpoint of being able to run. And then I also just want to mention in some of our other efforts in like the Sacramento Valley projects that we worked on that were kind of outspills of the last drought and the emergency regulations in mule deer and antelope, also have seen success from these types of engagement and efforts. On Antelope Creek is the example there where landowner Edwards Ranch and Los Molinos Mutual Water Company went through a process of improving their diversion structure through a grant with the state board. And then the outcome of that through the Lake and Streambed Alteration Agreement process was to actually, you know, it doesn't cover flows for all water years, but there was an agreement on a minimum flow that was equivalent to the emergency regulation drought minimum flow from 2014 and 2015. And for those of you that are in tune with what's going on in the Delta, you will have noticed that this year, the emergency regulations only apply to Mill and Deer Creek because Antelope Creek has reached an agreement with CDFW to provide those flows. So even if it's a little bit of water we're talking about, sometimes the cumulative projects can really serve a lot of benefit, or even an individual project like Green Valley, it saved a lot of fish in 2015. And it sounds like from 2016 and on that there's been a lot of lessons learned on how to extend those flows, like Rick mentioned. In 2015, we were just trying to get through about 3 weeks worth of time to keep the water quality good enough to keep the fish alive. So anyhow, you know, I think there's a whole lot of benefit to these, and a lot more can actually be, you'd be surprised, but more benefit can be achieved through these than a lot of the state water board's more regulatory actions that are kind of rigid and firm. These add some flexibility. And when we do adopt emergency regulations, we do try to provide a pathway for these to be successful within the regulatory framework. If it's just standard curtailments, it's a little bit clunkier. It's kind of a priority of right thing, and so we can't really deviate from the priority of right. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents on this item. I really like the program. So if there's no more questions, we can transition to the drought updates. My plan is to go ahead and skip a break here, to not have a break. I think we are still close enough on track to get through this in the 2 hours. If it looks like we're going to go longer than that, then we'll throw maybe a break in after this item. But before we jump to the drought updates, we wanted to do our next poll. So if we can go ahead and shoot out the next poll item. And we'll give everybody a couple minutes to answer it once it pops up.
Hey Dan, so I created the poll on the forums website directly, so hopefully more people can access it. I can send out the link in the chat, but it has all 3 questions.
Okay, let's do that then. And we'll take a moment for everybody to find that link and respond. Should we just do it that way, Mina, or should we do it both ways?
I can go ahead and do it both ways. See if it works.
Let's then just take a minute and put them both up, Mina. So for those of you having problems responding to the poll through Teams, the link is now put into the chat, which hopefully will allow everybody to respond. For those of you that can respond on Teams, you can go ahead and just do so. I believe we have 2 more questions for today.
Dan, was there just the one question so far?
Yeah, it looks like it's just the one so far.
Okay.
And Mina, do you want to go ahead and put up the second question now? Or the last question? Technically the third question. Great. All right, so as folks are responding, I'll go ahead and tee up this next item, and we're going to leave these open until we start item 4. So following this, we'll close them so we can put the results together and talk about them at the end. So I think for the drought updates, we'll go State Water Board, CDFW, NEMS, the Bureau, and DWR if you're on the line, and then we'll go to local agencies, and then anybody else that has drought updates. If you don't have any updates, you can just either say no updates or be silent, and we'll move to the next agency or entity. So I'll go ahead and start with State Water Board drought updates. I have an update. I'm mainly focused for my work in the Russian River watershed right now. So in that watershed, we do have the emergency regulation. It's primarily a curtailment and human health and safety regulation for the Russian River watershed as a whole. Right now, curtailments have been temporarily suspended for the month of November. And it was looking like maybe we would need to put those back into place in December unless we got some rains, but November's been pretty nice so far as rainfall, and with today's storm as well. It's probably less likely that we'll need to put those curtailments back in place, but we typically run our analysis on a monthly time step. And if it shows that there should be enough water to meet all needs for that month, then we won't run it again until the next month. If we have shortage, we run it more frequently. So we'll be looking to do an updated run a little bit before Thanksgiving and have some notification on any additional need for curtailments, or they will stay suspended for December before December hit. Other than that, the good news is these rains have, while it's slow, but the rains have been doing a good job filling back up the reservoirs. So hopefully we're in a better place moving into next season. We can continue to get some more water in those reservoirs because it's desperately needed. So let's see, moving to, and I don't know from State Water Board who we have on the line. Is there anybody that can give an update on Scott Shasta? not hearing anyone for Scott Shasta. How about anybody in the Bay Delta for either Bay Delta or Mill Deer Antelope updates? Hearing no one. So I guess big picture from what I kind of know in the Scott Shasta, I believe there are still some curtailments that may be in place there. I think the Scott responded and are lifted. I'm not positive about the Shasta at this point, but again, the rains have, those two watersheds do have minimum flow requirements that need to be met before folks can divert. And the kind of order of priority goes with the highest priority is the groundwater, overlaying groundwater, which are folks that divert groundwater and use it on the property they divert it from on the overlying land. And then it moves through the adjudicated water rights system and then into the other appropriate water rights. And I think there's some riparian sprinkled in as well. The one nuance in that watershed for folks to know is that there's a difference. Not all groundwater is the same. Groundwater is the same, similar to surface water. There is an appropriate groundwater right, which is when you divert groundwater and say truck it off and sell it to be used somewhere else, versus diverting groundwater and using it over your own is more similar to a riparian right. In Mill and Deer Creek, I know the minimum flow requirement is in place. That order was sent out a while back. So there is the flow requirement diverters can't meet unless it's being met. I'm assuming that's not an issue right now, but I'm not positive how much. It's been a while since I looked at that watershed to know how much water is typically diverted during this time of year. And other than that, I don't have a lot of info on the larger Bay Delta regulation, curtailment regulation, and where we're at on that one either. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to CDFW for any updates.
I don't know if anyone from headquarters is on. I can give an update from my region if you like.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, as we kind of covered, we're moving from drought response in the current season to kind of planning for the future. And there's a joint outreach letter that's being developed with NIMS and the Water Board and CDFW to try to find partners and landowners to kind of move forward into the next drought. We're not sure what's going to happen with this next year. It's great that we're getting rain, but we're just trying to plan for the future. And we are getting some positions as a result of the current drought situation. So we'll be getting a drought water rights coordinator, a limited term position. So I'm looking forward to getting some help with that. And I think really just kind of planning for the future and figuring out how we can have some of these tools and things ready to go in a more timely manner next go around. We've got this template for the individual agreements with landowners that we've developed. And hopefully with this outreach effort, we'll have more folks coming forward that want to participate in the program. And we'll also be hiring some fisheries folks too for some drought stressor monitoring work and things that are going to be going on. So if anybody's looking for work or knows somebody looking for work, we've got a couple positions posted right now, I think. And then the other thing is just taking advantage of some of the funding, the drought response funding that's been made available in our region to pay for some operation and maintenance work on some of the existing flow augmentation projects. For example, Camp Meeker needs some updates. And so we're working to try to find ways to put some of that funding in place to support existing projects and additions to looking for other opportunities for new projects in our region. So that's, I think, pretty much all I have. If anybody has any questions, I can try to answer those. But like I said, somebody else from headquarters might have an update as well.
Thank you, Jesse. Any additional CDFW updates? Hearing none. Okay, moving over to National Marine Fisheries Service. Any additional updates to the VDI or above the VDI program that you already presented?
No, just working on the emergency reg issues in the Russian and I'll see if there's a couple other NIMS employees on. I'll see if they have anything to add. Nope, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Let's see, moving over to Department of Water Resources. Any update?
This is Norman from DWR, but I don't work in an area that really deals with drought on a day-to-day basis, so I don't really have much to add.
Okay, how about Bureau of Rec?
This is James Lee. Is anybody else from Reclamation on this call? So I don't have anything real specific about drought issues right now. I do have something that might be of interest to the group if you don't mind me sharing.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, sure. So I work on the Trinity River for the Trinity River Restoration Program, and you know, for 20 years we've managed flows on the Trinity. You know, within the prescription that is in the Trinity Record of Decision, which was a record of decision signed by the Secretary of the Interior, Bruce Babbitt at the time, and then the chairman of the Hooper Valley Tribe back in 2000 when they decided to adopt the preferred alternative of the Trinity River main stem fishery EIS. And some of the constraints in that Rod were that, you know, we would implement an annual hydrograph depending on the water year. So extremely wet, we'd have a certain amount of volume of water, and that's much greater than if we had a critically dry water year. But we wouldn't make the water year determination until April 1st, and then we wouldn't implement the hydrograph until sometime later that month, which left the fall, winter, and early spring portion of the hydrograph flat at a steady 300 cubic feet per second, all from October 15th until late April. We've been working on an environmental assessment to implement winter variable flows that are triggered by rainfall gauges in the area. So to synchronize variable flows in the main stem with higher flows in the incoming tributaries. And we have a EA prepared. We're hoping to sign a FONSI late, you know, within about a month or so. Hopefully we'll be able to actually implement it this winter. But you may be hearing a little bit about that if you haven't already. You know, it's an environmental document. There's still some questions. You know, we have our fingers crossed that we'll be able to do it this winter, but if not this winter, then, you know, we're in really good shape to do it next winter. So we're doing it. It's not affecting. We're doing it in such a way that we're not using additional water beyond what a regular water, you know, your determination will allow us to release. So it's not representing any greater water. We're just shifting the use from a different time of year, from the late spring and summer to winter and early spring when Chinook salmon and other salmonids are rearing in the Trinity River and would benefit from inundated floodplains and connected off-channel wetted habitat features. So that's kind of the highlight of what we're doing flow wise up here on the Trinity River, part of the Northern California Area Office of the Bureau of Reclamation. And we're also a interagency partnership. We have a lot of other partners on this, including CDF&W and the Department of Water Resources, the Forest Service, NOAA Fisheries, the Hoopa Tribe, the Yurok Tribe, and Trinity County. So anyway, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you for that update, James. Any other federal updates? All right, moving to, oh, yeah, go ahead.
It's Brian McFadden from the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board.
Skipped right over you, Brian. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. I just wanted to mention a little bit of good news that came out of the drought effort last summer. We were involved with a lot of coordination on flow augmentation projects. And one thing that we were able to do was to work with our colleagues at the State Water Board fee branch to create a new category for our NPDES permit fees, just to streamline the permitting of these flow augmentation projects. And so prior to this work, in order to get an NPDES, that's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit for flow augmentation projects, that somebody was looking at paying an annual fee of $2,811, and we created a new category for discharges that require minimal or no treatment systems to meet limits are authorized by the Regional Water Board to augment ambient stream flow conditions to support aquatic organisms, and are during times of low stream flows where conditions threaten survival of aquatic organisms. And that new fee is $250. So we brought the fee down by an order of magnitude, and we're hopeful that that will sort of pave the way for these projects to occur without as much difficulty. Certainly without as much permitting fees. So just wanted to mention that.
Great, thank you, Brian. And I should circle back to any other regional board updates. All right, how about local agencies? Any updates? All right, and then opening up to the group. Any other drought updates anybody wants to mention? All right, hearing none, if there'll be another opportunity just before we close here, most likely to be able to do any additional updates if something comes up that was missed. So we'll be moving on to item number 4 here, the SEF implementation work plan. At this time, this is your last chance to respond to the poll, and we're going to go ahead and close it and turn it over to Eric to present, I believe, on this item.
Thanks, Dan. Screen. Super. Can you see that okay, Dan?
Yeah.
Great. This is just a short item. And are you going to, after I'm done, are you going to share the results of the poll with the folks?
Yeah, that's correct. Mina's putting it together right now, and then she'll pull up the results. And then I was thinking maybe if you could lead any discussion you'd like to have through the results.
Perfect. Sounds great. Thanks. Okay, great. So this will be a very short update, and then we can follow up with any questions. And I'll do the first few slides, and Sarah's going to do the last couple of slides. So anyways, there's just 3 items we wanted to update the group on as it related to SEF. One is some of our ongoing work to publish the SEF technical products. The second is sort of the general accessibility of the products, tools, and information about SEF, which we continue to work on. And there were some questions in the poll that related to that. And then Sarah will give a quick update on the status of the development of the implementation work plan, which Julie presented at our last meeting. So we have, as you all are aware, external technical review is an important element of any of the products we produce, so that folks have a level of confidence in the approach and the products that come out of implementing that approach, and that there's general agreement among the community at large that this is a valid and reliable approach to pursue. So we have sort of 3 major avenues that we use for external technical review. Obviously, we have a lot of internal review by the collaborators on the technical work group, which is a mix of agency, academic, and sort of other partners, NGO partners. And so we've had a lot of ongoing review through that work group. This group has had an opportunity over the course of the development of CEF to see presentations and review some of the draft documents and kind of approaches, and that will be ongoing. And then the agency staff, primarily the Water Board and CDF and W, have had a lot of opportunity to review the technical approach. So those are things that we've all been sort of actively engaged in. The last two, review by external technical experts and then subsequent publication in peer-reviewed journals, is also an important element of this because it provides sort of a fresh set of eyes from outside of our area to provide external perspectives, and also provides a peer-reviewed citable resource that people can point to for future application. So to help facilitate those last two, we've partnered with folks in several other parts of the world, actually, on a special issue of the journal Frontiers in Environmental Science. So there's a topic, a special research topic that's been open for the better part of a year on environmental flows in an uncertain future. There's been 20 papers submitted. This is a topic that is not just limited to California. It's a global sort of topic, and so some of the editors, the special topic editors are leading it, are from the UK and Australia, as well as the US. So there's been 20 papers that have been submitted. We're just wrapping up the special issue right now. There's 8 papers in the special issue that are related to CEF, and I've kind of summarized them here. There are some, there's a paper related to just the framework overall. There's a paper related to the Section A of the CEF on the statewide model. Several papers related to Section B, which is a lot of the sort of region or location specific considerations, and then a couple papers on Section C, which relate to some of the kind of trade-off and balancing type of analysis. So we think that this will provide a nice forum for people to have a collection of peer-reviewed journal articles that they can reference that relate to CEF, and hopefully will be useful as people contemplate application of CEF in their regions in the future. So the other nice thing about this journal, and one of the reasons that we elected to use this journal, is that it's completely open access. So there's a link here, which I'm sure we'll be sharing the PowerPoints, and so you'll have this link. But as the papers are accepted for publication, they are available, all of the papers in the special issue are available on this link. And so as they're accepted, they're posted, and so they're all available, open access for free download. And so hopefully this provides a venue to make them broadly available to folks. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Sarah to talk a little bit about sort of availability of products via the CEF website.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Eric. So just a reminder that we have been consolidating information related to CEF as a whole at the cef.ucdavis.edu website. This is just a screenshot of the main front page. And just as a reminder that this is where you can find links to what CEF is about, as well as different project resources and sort of background information about the project. And so if we could go to the next slide, please. And so on the resources tab of this webpage, there's a publication list. And so we've been working to try to keep this relatively updated with all the peer-reviewed journals that are related to CEF. And as these new journal articles in the Frontiers special issue come out, we will post information about those here as well. So there'll be opportunities to, one thing we can do too is we'll add the link that Eric just mentioned onto the resources page, but in addition, each individual publication will be listed here with links to be able to download the papers. And so just a reminder to keep checking here as well. We'll do our best to keep this updated as new information comes out. And then the last slide, please. And then just a kind of final update on the work plan that Julie presented at the last meeting. So we did get some initial feedback from different agencies and organizations about different priorities that were and ideas for additional actions that could happen in the upcoming next couple of years now that we're moving forward with CEF. And basically, it was the reviews that we did get back, just in summary, was that there nobody seemed to note any large omissions or ideas or additional items that they wanted to see addressed or actions that they wanted to see taken. When we asked folks to look at their priorities, it was a general support for all items. There really was no clear priorities in terms of the different actions that were proposed that might have preference over others. All items really received some high scores, so I guess that's a good thing that we're at least identifying. Hopefully, we've identified some good next steps to take as we move forward with really implementing CEF throughout the state, and that there was some strong interest in further discussions about implementation, examples, training in CEF, and just as we move forward with really trying to put these actions into place around the state, that we continue to communicate and talk and exchange ideas and lessons learned about how environmental flow implementation is going. So as a result, we really didn't decide to make any additional revisions to the work plan. We will maintain the work plan as a living document. And currently that draft of the work plan is up on the CEF website. It's under the technical report tab that's on the website there. If you scroll to the bottom, there'll be some links there to both the original draft CEF technical report as well as this, this latest version of the work plan as a living document. So with that, I'll go ahead and probably switch it back over to Eric and open it up for, maybe we should talk about the poll and then have open discussions about any thoughts about implementing the work plan as we move forward. I think I'll end there.
Great. All right. So Mina, it looks like you took control back, which is good. Okay, great. So I think I'll just, what Mina's done is she's just put the results here, and I think we just wanted to kind of open this up for discussion. I think the poll was useful, and kind of, so just to summarize, looks like in response to the first question, the majority of people that the approach is understandable, which is good. There are sort of, looks like a subset that don't understand what CEF is or how to apply it. So I think we can explore what additional, I'd be interested to hear if there's additional things that we can do to better communicate CEF, or if maybe you're just new to the process. But if you've been participating in the process for an extended period of time and still are sort of not clear on what CEF is or what it's attempting to do, we should definitely talk about that. It seems like the majority of the respondents understand the approach, but are still struggling to think about how to apply it in their system, which when we jump down to the last question, I see there's a lot of interesting case studies, which may be a good way to help bridge that gap. And it looks like there's also some good support for additional guidance. Again, maybe that's some of the things we've talked about in the work plan, is developing some additional guidance on application. And so that's one of the key priorities in the work plan that Sarah just talked about. So before I jump to the second question, are there any questions or discussion on that? And Dan, maybe you can, because I can't see all of the chat and participants, so maybe you could help facilitate if there's any questions.
Yeah, you bet. So it looked like a second ago, Kimberly Burr had her hand up, but it went down. I'm not sure if she had a question on this or a broader question.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, Dan. I'm sorry, I'm Daniel. I just wanted to say that, with respect to implementation and kind of introducing stuff, I did try a couple of regional boards to see if I could get Julie and Sarah and Eric to come to make a quick presentation and just kind of really introduce the ideas to the regional board members in North Coast, mostly focused on the North Coast. And we're still hoping to have some sort of presentation to sort of, have people get familiar with the concepts, what it can and cannot do. And Brian McFadden's been great on helping me, kind of get you guys in front of the regional board and present this. So I just want to see the work move forward and not get shelved. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I'm hoping maybe February, sometime early next year, something like that might move forward. But keeping my fingers crossed.
Great, that would be great, and I think we'd love to do that or maybe attend one of the roundtable meetings as well.
And on that item, Kimberly, just for some background, some of the state board members have asked for internal briefing prior to any of that happening. So we're still working on getting on their calendars to provide an update to them prior to rolling it out from the water board perspective publicly. As far as like final document and stuff, we'd like to go through the process to finalize everything and have all the board members on board before we roll it out.
That makes
So
sense.
it's just kind of got a little delayed because their time is very limited with all the drought activity going on.
I see. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you.
Okay. Dan, were there any other questions or discussion on this first question before we move on?
I do not see any.
Great. Okay.
Hands
Super.
up.
Okay. So the second question was really trying to get at, if, in terms of implementation and, sort of as the framework rolls out, what are some potential barriers or challenges that may arise for doing exactly what we just talked about, which is beginning to implement SEF, which is hopefully, we invested so much time and effort to hopefully provide tools and a framework that can help address some of these challenging questions we're dealing with. So one of the top response here is sort of lack of technical capabilities or knowledge. So I think to me that sort of points to the fact that once the document is fully approved, we need to again focus on how we can provide some support at the local level for either training or additional outreach or discussions about how to implement. I think the idea is not that this would be sort of a centralized implementation, but it would be a set of tools and approaches that could be applied at the local level or at the regional level. And so I think, focusing on what additional trainings or support tools that we can provide to facilitate that regional or local implementation would be great. Again, that's another key element in the work plan that Sarah talked about is providing that. And so looking for those opportunities to advance the work plan to provide that would be a great next step forward. Looks like we obviously lack of funding or higher funding priorities. That's always understandable. We put that in there to just get an understanding of, is that really kind of the key challenge, that there's just so many other things we're all working on that are really important, and this hasn't quite risen to the top yet. So that seems like that's a issue for a few folks. And then, related to, no impetus or management need, which, means that, when there's a need or you're told that you need to do this, that'll sort of help move it up on your priority list. And then obviously the tools relate to the lack of knowledge. So I think this gives us some clear direction that one of the things that we need to focus on is really providing, user tools and outreach materials and training materials that can help folks become comfortable with using these. So I'll stop there, Dan, and see if there's any questions, comments, or other input.
All right, it looks like Jessie has her hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Eric, I was curious, I've been in meetings where people are presenting, we're reviewing environmental documents where some environmental flow schedules have been developed based on information, from the past. And in one particular meeting, somebody recommended that they use this approach. And, the response was sort of like, well, we've already done all this analysis. And so we're not going to start all over again and try to come up with a flow schedule based on this new approach. And so I was kind of curious if you have any input on how, what if we wanted to do sort of a separate analysis or a comparative analysis of what, kind of a flow schedule the SEF approach would recommend versus the analysis that was done, for this particular project? Or is there support available for that, for us to consult with you guys to get input on things like that?
Yeah, so there's I heard sort of two questions in there, and I'll let others on the team jump in. I think in terms of the technical front end, first part of your question, which is the comparative analysis, I think we've talked a lot about the fact that, there's a lot of work that's already, ongoing or has been completed. And, this is not intended to sort of replace or undo any of that. And so there has been, obviously, through the in-stream flows program, stuff that Bronwyn has worked on. There's been, I think, some great work that sort of compares in some of the priority watersheds looks to compare how the functional flows approach under CEF relates to some other approaches that have been used in the past or are currently being applied. But I think continuing to do those comparisons and those crosswalks is really useful, and in particular to understand how sort of the more function-based approach that CEF uses kind of translates to maybe a species or a habitat-based approach that has been the focus of previous efforts. They're not, I think they are definitely compatible, and I think understanding those crosswalks is really important. So for example, if you have a set of flow recommendations that was developed to support certain species or habitats, those probably cover a portion of the functions that we would look at under CEF, but there may be other functions that are not as well provided for with that approach. And so there may be an opportunity to sort of augment past work to fill in some of those gaps for other aquatic functions that were maybe not the focus of the original analysis. So I think there's a lot of value that could be gained by doing that type of kind of comparative and crosswalk analysis. The question in terms of, sort of resources, funding or support was sort of the second part of your question. And I'd say, right now, the technical team doesn't have any direct support for that type of analysis or participation, but I think, we'd be interested in exploring where those opportunities might be.
I guess I would just add on to that. This is Bronwyn Stanford from CDFW. We at headquarters, we have been doing some of those comparisons. And I think, Jesse, if there are cases where you would like to think about that more, we're definitely happy to talk with you and kind of help work through some of those data questions. So yeah, reach out.
Yeah.
We've been, yeah. We have
That'd be great.
You.
I think too, like in terms of messaging, promoting this approach, it might be helpful to talk about that as well, just the ways in which we can kind of encourage people to consider this approach, even if they've started work in another, using a different approach.
Yeah, thanks, Bronwyn. That was, I think Bronwyn's probably the most out in front of this issue and some of the work that she's done.
It looks like we also do have a comment in chat from an individual who's from the private industry that attends these meetings. I was wondering, about level of participation and stuff regarding asking questions and whatnot, and whether it's appropriate for any conflict of interest. What I want to, maybe it's a good time, we haven't talked about this since kind of the group really was formed, but this is an open group, an open public group. It's not intended to come to any regulatory outcome or any other outcome, and all opinions are welcome in this group and views are welcome in this group. And as participants in this group, it is on us to make sure that we are open to anybody's views and their opinions as well. So I would say, please feel free to comment and ask any questions that you may have. It's an agency. The California Water Monitoring Council is a structured council that was kind of directed and set up through the agencies, but it's a public forum. So Eric, let's turn it over to you.
I think he's talking to not me, Eric, but Eric, the commenter.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes.
Hi, this is Eric Rothberg. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, thanks for that. I've been participating in the in some of the forums and just interested in learning more. And obviously, I've been a little bit reluctant to raise my hand or talk too much because of obviously perceived conflict of interest and realizing that the state or any government organization is not really supposed to be recommending any companies on the private sector. Now, I just wanted to comment that we are an Australian company and we have a big facility here in Modesto. And part of what we do is work with irrigation districts and water districts on the management and control of surface water. And one of the areas we're thinking about possibly is trying to partner and maybe donating some systems for areas where people want to control and monitor flows coming in or out of rivers. And our systems are solar powered; they don't require any power, and they basically can be controlled through the cloud, where you would then see how much water is coming in or out of a pond, or program the system to do that type of thing. So I just wanted to put that out there. We are currently working with several projects in the USBR and some of our districts that are funded, but we thought the environmental side might be something that we'd be interested in partnering with people possibly. So thank you.
And Eric, if you would like, for those participants that may be interested, you could drop a contact in the message box there, and folks will have a way to contact you.
Will do. Thank you.
And I do not see any other comments on number 2.
Great. All right, super. So we'll move on to the last question. And this is really, again, was a nice transition from Eric's comment that exploring where there might be those partnership opportunities. We know that the implementation work plan that Sarah discussed is going to rely heavily on partnership. And so we're interested to explore where those opportunities may be. And so it looks like this is nice to see that there's a lot of interest in pursuing a case study application, which I think pursuing those applications would definitely help with some of the issues that came up in the previous 2 questions in terms of understanding the approach and how it applies in specific systems, as well as building technical capabilities and knowledge at the local level. So I think those case study applications are of great interest to us. Obviously, monitoring data, which was one of the other, or funding or in-kind partnership or support, those are all great opportunities for partnership. And so that's really encouraging to see. And I'm wondering, Dan, if maybe we can encourage folks, if they have a specific interest in their area, maybe they can send that information to you or Mina. We can start to create a mechanism to follow up with them in terms of how we might pursue some of those case studies. So if you have a particular interest in the area you're in and how you might want to partner, then we'd love to hear from you as a follow-up to this discussion, and maybe we can pursue those opportunities and then report back at that to this group at a later meeting. So Dan, or is that okay to have them follow up with you, or is there somebody else we should have them follow up with?
Yeah, if it's all right with Mina, I'll put her on the spot. If she could drop her email in the text message box or the message box there, and you can send those to Mina. She'll compile them, and we can discuss at the next meeting.
Okay, great. That would be super. So then I'll turn it back down to see if there's any other questions or hands raised or things like that in response to this question.
Yeah, so it looks like Chris has her hand up.
Yes.
I think you're on mute.
Yes,
Yep.
I have my hand up, but it was for Eric. Can I still ask Eric a quick question?
Of course.
Okay, Eric.
Eric Carr.
Yes, very interesting to hear from you. I'm curious, what watersheds are your districts in? Can you name a few of how many?
Was this for Eric Rothberg, the question?
Yes, the gentleman from the Australian company, if I got that right.
Correct, yeah. So we are working very closely with Solano Irrigation District, for example, Yolo, Modesto, Oakdale, Madera, quite a few irrigation districts in the valley. Most of what we're doing with them is on optimizing their canals for surface water distribution and really trying to save water and optimize the operation versus manual. But these are the areas where we've been working with here in California. We have some other ones in Florida and big projects in Nebraska and Washington and Idaho as well.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. That answers my question. And then back to you, Daniel, real quick. If we're interested in partnering on a project to implement SEF or to educate on SEF, we contact you or Maya or Mia? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, no problem. So go ahead and contact, you can contact Mina Chong, and she left her email in the chat, and it looks like Eric also put his there. And what we can do is we can compile that list so that we can bring it to the next meeting of where people are interested in potentially pursuing a case study application, and to kind of start that connection with other groups. So it's not specific that you would partner with us, the State Water Board, and we have funding to do it, but at least we'll get the interest together, and then hopefully people can start to discuss where they might be able to partner up and work together to either pursue funding, or maybe there's funding and interest, you know, those types of things. Just kind of have an open forum on that.
Thank you for that clarification. And I will this time put my hand down. Okay, if I can find it.
All right, do we have any other questions or comments? And we might as well open it up to the poll in general.
Yes, any other reactions? You just got my sort of quick summary, so I'm open to any other impressions or questions or reactions.
All right, I'm not seeing anything additional at this time. Thank you, Eric. So let's see, at this point, we're on item 5 here, which is just kind of our general round robin. So I will open the floor up to the group, just in case we have more than one person that wants to chime in here. Same type thing, if you just want to raise your hand. If you're on the phone, you can just go ahead and provide any update you would like to update, or if there were any other questions people had, you can ask them at this time. All right, I am not seeing any.
I could
maybe not. Yeah, go ahead.
This is Greg Reese, Bay Institute. I could provide an update on the San Joaquin River Restoration Program.
Great.
It's so the river has been disconnected since June below Gravelly Ford, and it was going to be reconnected in September with high releases from Bryant Dam, but due to cold water pool concerns, we're delaying that. The restoration administrator and the partners are all paying close attention to the cold water pool as it cools, but it also is declining as releases are emptying that cold area. And so it looks like it's going to be close. That cold water pool is declining. Also, temperatures look like they're going to be warm for another week. And then after November 16th, it looks like air temperatures going to be cooler. And we're going to get into a nice zone for air temperatures, but it's going to be close. The goal is to reconnect the river as soon as possible. Once high releases begin, hopefully in about a week or two. It might take about a month to reconnect Reach 2A, which is essentially the river down to Mendota Pool, and then the portions below that would take longer. But then that would set things up for the spring run. There's currently, I don't remember the number of reds, I think something like 70 reds below Bryant Dam. And that would set them up for out migration in the spring if we get water past into February, if it's not another critically dry year.
All right, thank you for that update. Any questions on that item? All right, Chris, you have your hand up.
Oh, you boy. Okay, I'm going to take my hand down because I forgot my question. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. let's see, any other updates?
Oh, yep.
Yes, Chris?
Okay, I remembered my question. As you know, you probably all know, the groundwater sustainability plans are due by January 2022. So a lot of those groundwater sustainability plans are coming in at the Department of Water Resources. And I can speak for Napa, and I've heard from some of the north counties that are in a coalition with one of our projects that the whole stream flow issue is the big wild card, and a lot of the activists are wondering why, you know, the lead agencies in the local counties, and specifically the groundwater sustainable agencies, are not you know, interested in learning about CEF. And I'm just wondering if the water board is discussing this and trying to find nexus with Sigma or not.
At this point, it's one of our work plan items to provide more information related to groundwater in CEF and kind of start to make that nexus at the water board level. We do not, the way the code is set up and the way that we usually operate is we do not direct people or require people to take a certain approach to develop that information. That is, we just kind of set the bar and provide the standards that they need to meet. So we wouldn't tell them that they need to use CEF or to use anything else. And at this point, as I mentioned, the State Water Board has not formally reviewed or released CEF, so that information is available for your local stakeholders. And I don't see us pushing CEF and telling people to use CEF. It's intended to be more of a broad guidance document. It kind of comes out as a water board product, but really it's a product of this working group. And I see that a little bit more as stakeholders participating to provide help and assistance on the development of flows, and to provide guidance to the GSAs that this information is available for them to consider and use, and go through the standard public process of participating in their meetings of plan development. I'm not really directly related or involved in that arena, so I'm probably not the right person to ask. But yes, broadly, California Environmental Flow Framework is intended for all stakeholders. It's something the water board may use to provide information to inform the development of flow objectives or environmental flow requirements. But even the water board itself would do that on a case-by-case basis as far as the applicability of CEF. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does a lot, but I have two quick follow-ups. You did mention it's on your work plan. Can you state how or in what way it is on your work plan? And then the follow-up is there discussions, or does DWR have any inquiries about it?
Yes, for the work plan question real quick, Sarah Yarnell dropped a link to the work plan that we have, that our draft work plan for this working group, not the state. It's not a state water board work plan. It's just where does the environmental flows work group go next, and what additional information should we try to put together. That link's in chat, and you can grab it and review the work plan there. And I would I don't know if there's anybody from DWR on the phone that would be able to answer the second half of your question, but I will open it up to anybody that is.
So Chris, this is Eric again, just while waiting for DWR, just would just elaborate. So Dan gave a great response in his perspective from the water board. So, but as somebody just who's on the technical team and doesn't have some of the same sort of policy considerations that Dan laid out, I think I would say that Though, as Dan alluded to, the framework I think is very would it be an appropriate tool and approach to address some of the questions that you were asking, and in the work plan we sort of discussed that this is a high priority, is to get a better understanding of how some of the approaches that we've developed could be applied in the context of groundwater sustainability planning, to better recognize that. And so I think we, from a technical level, would be really interested in exploring the opportunity to partner with somebody on that, to kind of better demonstrate how this approach could benefit some of the discussions that might occur under the development of a GSP. And then the last thing I'll say is Sarah, who's we glossed through this, but one of the articles that is in that special issue does sort of touch on some of these issues in the context of several watersheds, and Sarah's the lead author on that. And so that will ultimately be on the website once it's approved, once it's fully accepted. So just, more of kind of an answer from the technical perspective versus from the kind of agency perspective.
Thank you.
All right. Any other updates at this point, or questions, comments? All right. Moving on to our final item, which is just a call for any potential topics for the next meeting. Anybody have any hot items? All right. If between now and then you think of anything, you can email Mina, who left her her email in the chat of any potential topics you might like to discuss at our next meeting. And we can go ahead and wrap up. Mina, were there any action items that you flagged?
No, I didn't catch any.
All right. So let's go ahead and call it a meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your ongoing participation in these, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.